So once we have this kind of introduction to the supply chain networks, and I have shown you several examples in the agriculture, the industry, in the global. This one has shown you the 3 examples, and I have also told you that we have a multi-tier supply chain. It's not one player; it is several players, which are companies, and these companies are independent players. In other words, if there is a supplier of auto components, he is located in Japan, and if your manufacturer is in India, then they have to collaborate, but the supplier has no basically binding relationship with the manufacturer. There could be contracts, and it has to be a contractual relationship, and so on. So when you are studying the suppliers, and it's a kind of a social network. The supply chain network is a kind of social network, but the social network is not persons. Usually Facebook and other social networks are between persons, but it is not persons here, it is organizations, independent organizations, which are globally separated and located in different countries with different cultures. So how do you integrate such a supply chain network? And if you look at the previous diagrams, there are 3 flows that happen in a supply chain network. First one is goods flow, that is the material flow. It goes from suppliers to the manufacturers, the components flow, and from the manufacturer to the distributors, the final products flow, from the distributors to the retailers, the customized products flow, and finally to the customers. So there is the goods flow involved in the supply chain. And second one that is important to note is the information flow. So we have the information flowing exchanged between all the partners, either through faxes or through internet or through telephone calls or through videos, whatever. There is an information exchange that happens among all the players in the supply chain. And the third one, and the most important one, is the finance, because unless money is paid, nothing moves. So this financial transactions among companies usually happens through banks or financial institutions. So let's look at how these 3 flows are integrated in the supply chain networks. So you have these players in the supply chain network, that is the suppliers, you have manufacturers, and you have distributors and retailers, and you have service providers. The service providers could be basically logistics providers who provide for the transport, like truck owners, or it could be train, or it could be ships, whatever. So you have all these players, and all these players are all globally distributed. They are not spatially co-located. They are all at various places over the globe. And the next thing that happens is, because the goods need to move from one player to the other, in other words, from suppliers to the manufacturers, and manufacturers to the distributors, distributor to the retailers, and also to the service providers, and so on. So it is important you have a network, and this network is called the logistics network. And the red dots that I am showing here, the red dots, these are called hubs. You know, there are places like, for example, in India, it is Bombay or Chennai, or it could be Singapore, Hong Kong, or Notre Dame. These are all ports or supply hubs, or there could be air hubs, or there could be train hubs. For example, India, they are building Nagpur as a hub between the various places. So there is a well-developed network with multimodal transportation between the suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, and so on. So that is the logistics network. And the next one that comes in is the information network. I mean, this is the Web 2.0, that where either they are all connected to the suppliers are all connected through various means, informationally connected. So basically, with the supplier need to send an information, or the manufacturer has to send an information, either the product or the financial information, he could do so immediately using this one. These are all secure transactions over the web. And finally, there is a web connectivity among the banks of these various players. In other words, money transfer can happen, and so it is very important that the finance banks are connected, because the supplier, before he just gives okay to ship the products to the manufacturer, he needs to have a money guarantee. In other words, he may not have all the money that paid to him before he ships, but when the manufacturer receives the particular shipment, then the supplier needs to get paid. Now, what is the assurance? He gets the assurance from his bank. His bank gets the assurance from the manufacturer's bank. These are called letter of credits. So these kind of financial transactions and also insurance transactions have to happen in the supply chain, and that happens through the financial network. And so once you have this network, you can divide this integrated supply chain into 3 sub-networks. The first one is what we call the demand network. The demand network is basically depending on the customer demand that you have. The customer demand always occurs through the retailers, and the retailers are going to order depending on what their requirements are from the distributors. And the distributors means they have a warehouse where these particular items are stored. And the second one is what we call supply network, where you have the suppliers supplying to the manufacturer, and this particular network, depending on the manufacturer's requirement, the suppliers supply, and there is logistics that is associated with it. It is called B2B logistics or business to business logistics. And the logistics that is involved in the manufacturer to distributor to retailer is called B2C logistics. And finally, the third network, which is also a very important network, which basically connects the suppliers, retailers, manufacturers and others, it is the service providers. These could be service centers, as I said in a previous slide. These can be repair centers where the suppliers supply the spare parts for the repair of the particular products of the customer. So you have this network and then the 3 sub-networks for this. Now this diagram is an important diagram here because it shows that the connectivity between the various players in the supply chain network. You have the 3 kinds of players here. The one is the manufacturers, the distributors, retailers, the suppliers, and the service providers, and the financial service providers, and also the IT, the information and communication networks, and so on. So the next slide will see we'll analyze this particular diagram. There are 3 flows. As I said, the first flow is the goods flow or the material flow between all the partners. Now, the logistics network provides a streamlined material flow between all the partners. It's very important that the time that is taken to supply this is low, and also the cost, because if the time is high, that is, then the manufacturer has to keep what is called safety inventory. So because of that, what you need to do is your logistics network has to be streamlined and the lead times has to be reduced. And the lead time is reduced, that means the quality is high as well as the cost is low. And the second network is the communication network. As I said, it provides information integration between the companies in the supply chain network. And this information that is transmitted could be the ordering process, or it could be the information regarding the status, or it could be the information regarding the requirements and so on. So, it becomes, or it can be information regarding the funds flow. And finally, the financial network, it connects all the institutions providing the funds, letters of credit, insurance and so on. So, basically these are the three sub flows that happen, and these are the three networks that facilitate the flow of the goods, the information and the finance in this. And there are three subnetworks, as I said. One is the demand subnetwork. It has manufacturing, distribution, retail, logistics, finance. And here there is what is called perfect delivery. Perfect delivery is what is called Six Sigma delivery. Six Sigma is if the customer makes an order and there could be several things which can make him unhappy. First one is there could be a defective product, or the product could be delivered late, or it could be there are several other kinds of things that can happen with this, that could be delivered to the wrong person and so on. So, what is important is the perfect delivery, which is called Six Sigma. That means the defect should be less than 1 in a million. The second one is supply chain subnetwork, where it's a business to business network with the suppliers, manufacturers, and they are what are called inbound logistics players, financial institutions, freight forwarders and so on. This is a huge network. That's because the material that flows between companies is, it's an orderly flow. It's a huge flow. It has a lot of financial implications in this, because the flow has to be at the right time, at the right place, and it depends your production times and the production capability depends on this particular subnetwork. And finally, you have the service subnetwork, which connects consumers with suppliers and manufacturers, after sales service centers and so on. So, basically the three subnetworks which I have shown earlier, that is the demand subnetwork, the supply subnetwork and the service network, are the three features of this particular supply chain network. And if you are talking of what are called processes, business processes, there are three business processes in this. And the first one is procurement. Procurement is sourcing raw materials and components from suppliers. See, it's a vendor and logistics provider selection, delivery scheduling and inventory management. These are all the issues associated with procurement. And procurement is an important business process for any manufacturer, because if you don't select the right suppliers, the right logistics players, and your deliveries could be delayed, which means that your production gets delayed, and that means your customers will be unhappy and so on. So, you have to keep a lot of inventories if your vendors and logistics providers are not good. So, the selection of the vendors and the sourcing of raw materials, it is not always the cost considerations that matter in the procurement. It is what is called total landed cost. It is the cost that taxes you pay if you are importing it. It is the logistics players that you pay. It is the coordination costs that you pay. And there are several costs that are associated with the procurement. And one has to be carefully select these partners. And the second one, business process is manufacturing. This manufacturing could be in a single location, or it could be geographically distributed. It means that you have basically companies like Flexatronics, they have a factory in Chennai, they manufacture cell phones, or they manufacture various other things like laptops or so on, but they're all, it could be on single location or it could be a multi-plant location. In other words, part of the product is done in one location and it is shipped to the other location and so on. So this kind of thing happens in apparels. For example, in the apparel industry, we will see this particular example in more detail in the later lectures of this course. And finally, it is the distribution and retail. In other words, the customer is served through the retailers and the retailers are served through distributors, and distributors get their products from manufacturers. So it consists of packaging, transportation, warehousing, and sometimes the manufacturer can directly ship to the retailers or it can outsource to a third party and so on. So basically, whatever happens in the supply chain, but as we saw in the multi-tier supply chain diagram, there are three processes of procurement, manufacturing, distribution and retail are the three business processes here. Now, let's look at the finance supply chain. Here, what happens is you have basically these 4 or 5 players, that is the suppliers, manufacturers, retailers and distributors. The material flows from supplier through the customer. In other words, as the material flows, value is added to the particular product. That is, the supplier to manufacturer, manufacturer to the retailer, and retailer to the customer. But what happens to the finances? So the movements of documents and goods happen in a forward direction. So there are things like demand forecasting, how much of the products the customers want and so on. And also there is what is called just-in-time manufacturing, where you don't want to keep any inventory. If you keep inventory costs money. So if you want to reduce your cost, then it is necessary that you keep as much less inventory as possible. But if you don't keep inventory, then your basically your production or your supply chain can be disrupted if there is any problem. Let's say supposing some machine failures, some truck failures on the road, these kind of disruptions can affect your supply chain. So some amount of inventory is needed, but too much of inventory means too much of money inside, and also there is a lot of obsolescence costs. On the other hand, the financial supply chain goes in the reverse direction. It is the supplier who puts the money first, but when does he get the money back? He gets back after three months. But the retailer sells to the customer, he gets the money first, and it moves backward. Retailer to manufacturer and manufacturer to the suppliers and so on. So the cash flow forecasting becomes very, very important in the financial supply chain. So it's important to see that the goods move in one direction, forward direction, and the funds move in the backward direction.